Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for episode 3 of Dark Fun in the Dark Sun, also known as the one where we start to seize the means of production. But seriously, we're setting ourselves up very well to be an integral part of the revolution. For this session, we had Raylan, Little Jenny, Kadan, and the Largeson brothers, Halvar and Lord Jackhammer. What a stupid name. To explain where Eighth Wonder went, basically the guards realized that half giants can climb out of the pits, so he went to go dig them deeper. And then, as you can imagine, later on his jerk brothers started peeing down pits, because that's the thing that they do in the Largeson house. Turns out they were peeing down the wrong pit though, so anyway. So if you don't know what's going on, you can always check out the link there and down below. But basically there was a big explosion and then Faldar of the Veiled Alliance came over, we helped him, we killed the guard, and then promised to keep him hidden until the morning where he could change himself into a different shape and walk out as a guard. Or something. In the morning, Chichikaran, aka Doug the Bug, comes up and he starts to talk to me because he's like my clutchmate, and I find out about his history, and he was sent by his former clutchmates to come to Tyr to buy iron weapons because they heard that, you know, the great iron mines of Tyr, you can get iron weapons anywhere. Well, didn't work out so well, and they didn't send him with money or anything to trade with, and then he got drugged with me and ended up in the slave pit. But he's like super into human customs. It really reminds me of Mr. Weasley from Harry Potter, who's just like, oh, look at all these muggle things. That's how I feel Doug is. He's like, oh, can you eat this? How do you wear this piece of clothing? I feel like that's what he's about, and he'd be like super interested in rubber duckies, I'm sure. So we get to work like usual. And of course Halvar has to mess with Phoebus because Phoebus is a jerk and he tried to get far away, but Halvar was able to throw a sky rock far enough. When we're on break, a Mull who's like just covered in paint, so he's obviously on the paint crew, comes up to Little Jenny and was like, oh, didn't you get caught because of Senator Verassi being such a jerk? And she wasn't actually caught then, so she was like, no, I got away, like, didn't you? And he was super offended, and so he like took a bite of like this fresh piece of fruit and pieced out. And she was like, wait a minute, I want to talk to you. But he was gone. Around that time, Charlie, who's also Aramis, we're bad for just giving everybody new names, came up to Kadan and he was like, hey, there were those like gladiator chicks fighting. Where are they? And Kadan was like, well, I don't know. We threw one that way. We threw the other one that way. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna go find them. And so off he went. And like nothing too exciting happened for the rest of the day other than, you know, screwing with Phoebus. I'm pretty sure his crew had to stay late. He's just not very good at that game. And then at dinner, Cousin Melanda makes sure that we do have some extra water, which is great. I mean, we can produce as much water as we need to now, but, you know, it's kind of nice. Don't have to waste a spell slot. And then she also kind of asks, you know, what would we think about sabotaging the ziggurat? And the two Largeson brothers are like, well, if we sabotage it, then we're going to be stuck here longer because we're going to have to keep building it. We want to get out of here. And she was like, yeah, but if we don't sabotage it, we might all die. But it didn't really go far at that point. While we were eating dinner though, this heavily tattooed Mull came up because I am the weakest of the party, I'm the most squishy, and was like, give me all your things. I want your water, I want your bedroll, everything you have, I want it now. And I was like, no. And so his like little goons, his 5 humans came up and one of them shoved me. Well, I was super lucky to have a Largeson brother right beside me who happens to not like bullying, which is Halvar, which is ironic because he bullies his brothers. And so the fight commenced, as you can imagine. You have 2 half giants. It's very rare that they won't get into the scrum. It went pretty well in our favor. We're lucky that we built some pretty good characters considering we're in a slave pit and we have almost no weapons. Probably the best interactions came from the Largeson brothers, of course, because Lord Jackhammer wants to be like a pro wrestler. So he went over, grabbed the Mull, put him over his shoulder and like pile drived him behind him. That kind of shifted everybody's focus onto him, which was nice because I'm very squishy. Meanwhile, everybody else around used this opportunity to just riot and kind of take care of their grievances. Halvar was still dealing with the guy that shoved me, so he was like trying to reef off his head, and when he finally got it off, he like shook the body and was like, that's what you get for being a bully. And then the guards started to take notice and they started to come over. So Raylan and Kadan did the best things that they could have, and they just crammed a bunch of food in their face. And Raylan actually stuffed a bunch in her pockets just in case any of our friends needed food because our dinner kind of got interrupted. Finally, the guards break it up and they're all like, you know, get back to your own place. And then later, Kadan and Halvar went back because Kadon's of the grave domain, and so he has to bury the bodies, and so they go bury the bodies later. But when we get back to our little lean-to that we stay in, there's like this little mound in the ground. And so I dig it up, and it's a healing fruit, which was left by Faldar because we helped him out. Being a druid, I was like, let's try to plant this. So I planted it, and we'll see what happens in about 5 weeks when we won't be here, so I'll have to remember to bring that with me. In the morning, the mole that had come up to little Jenny the day before has like this really wicked water skin, and she's like, hey, wait a minute, I remember you now. And also, where did you get that water skin? And he told her about himself. His name is Hamish, and he was a slave for his master, and his master really wants him back because he, you know, manned his fruit stand pretty well. And so he's keeping him as comfortable as he can. They talked about how senators are trash for a while, like just they're the worst, nobles suck, all that stuff, and they really bonded. He also has a lot of contacts on the outside, and so little Jenny was like, can you get me anything from the outside? And they made a deal that he was gonna go try to find her a bone rapier, and in return she would offer protection to him. Because I mean, he's being taken care of on the outside, so obviously he's going to be a target. Because of the whole half-giants ruling their alignment that day, Lord Jackhammer doesn't want to do any work. And as an overseer, he's actually entitled to not, but Halvar's not having it, so he skyrocks him in the back of the head. And Lord Jackhammer's like, wow, man, those skyrocks, because they're idiots and they don't realize what's happening. And then a little bit later, there's a different half-giant that's getting picked on by a bunch of elves. And part of my character is that I feel very empathetic towards people getting hurt, and I don't like it. So I just like blast it lightning down on some of the elves. Even though I'm an elf too, I don't care. And then we get over there, we kind of help the half-giant out, deal with the situation, and he introduces himself as Urgos. And we didn't actually give him a nickname, which is pretty amazing. We did roll though to see if he happened to be a large sin brother, but he was not. It was close. We decide that, hey, if 2/3 half-giants are good, 4 half-giants are gonna be even better. So Lord Jackhammer goes, finds his overseer and says, Urgos works for me now. And so now we've got another half-giant. Urgos also does this thing where he kind of finds the most charming person and tries to emulate them, and the most charming person is our little halfling. So you've got this giant half-giant trying to be like the little halfling. Rather interesting. Later that night, Hamish comes back. He's got the bone rapier that little Jenny asked for, but he looks really shaken up. So we ask him what's going on, and he said he had to paint this room inside the ziggurat, and he's pretty sure that because of what he's seen, he's going to die. Because we've just been stealing people from other crews left, right, and center, I'm like, hey, Lord Jackhammer, get him on our crew. And he's like, that's a perfect idea. And so he does, and now we've got another one. That night, when Lord Jackhammer goes back into his little apartment area, his roommate Argus is concerned. He's like, I don't think I'm gonna meet my quota tomorrow, and I've been told one more time, and so we decide to help, because we like Argus. He seems pretty cool. He's pretty good at arm wrestling. And so that day, Hamish, Urgos, and little Jenny all go over to the wood stacking crew, which he's on, and they totally meet their quota all as well. Later on in the day, Charlie shows up, and he's got one of the female gladiators with him. She's the tall one, which is actually the one that Kadon put his money on, and her name is Lisanne. And she has 3 half-giants with her, and they're all in gladiator armor. Basically, she's looking for a new champion because Dakos, the champion of the gladiator ring, has died. But if you remember from Welcome to the Dark Sun, he's not actually dead. When we were in battle, we knocked him out instead, and we're like, we want the dead body, and they were like, I guess. And so we took it back, and Salantithius actually set him up with quite a bit of money and sent him away with his family so he could go to Uruk. And then throughout the rest of the story, Salantithius just kept sending stuff. So if I take Salantithius after this story, when we do the road to Uruk, he's got a friend there. But anyway, Lisanne is looking for a new champion, and Charlie is like, Kadon is the greatest champion fighter that you will ever meet. Which is ironic because Kadon tried to get away from guards, broke his sword, and ended up in custody. As much as he tries to say no, there's no stopping it, and so Kadon finds himself in the gladiator training area with Morvac the trainer. And he doesn't look too impressed with Kadon. He's like, you're scrawny. So he gives him a chance to grab a weapon, throws him in a cage, and then releases an elephant-sized stag beetle into the cage with him. And basically he's like, if you win, you live. If you lose, you die. And it was not going well for Kadon, like right off the start. We were all pretty sure he'd be rolling a new character soon. But he managed to like heal himself up enough and then got the stag beetle down to half health, at which point the trainer called it off and was like, all right, you can be a gladiator. And he basically told them to train and get ready because there'd be some big games coming soon with the completion of the ziggurat. That night though, he got to come back to the pit with us, which is awesome because we do like having our friends around. Because Kadon's been taken off of her crew, Hasseval the Templar came up and said, here you go, here's Citra the elf, she's gonna be on your crew now. And my lovely friend Doug Chichikaran, who is a Thri-Kreen, was like, she looks tasty. She's an elf. And I was like, don't eat her yet. If she screws us over later, you can eat her, but right now we need bodies. And so he said, all right, if she screws you over, I will eat her. So that's probably something we're gonna have to deal with later, but here's hoping, fingers crossed, it'll be okay. Next, Grange, the human that little Jenny been talking to about escape, comes up and says, hey, there's gonna be a powwow soon. How many of your friends can we trust? Because we do want you guys involved. And she's like, oh, the Largesons are idiots. But we decide the more the merrier, because if something happens to any of us, it's better that all of us know. But I do warn him to use the word breakout and not escape, because Lord Jackhammer promised to talk about escapes, but he's too stupid to know that, you know, breakout is the same thing. And then because it's what they do best, just before we go to bed, the Largeson brothers fight. Why? In the morning, I remembered that I'm a druid, and so I summoned some Kank to help haul the water. Well, we completely screwed Phoebus over. Like, we barely even had to work. There was just ridiculous. And like the guards and the Templar are like, well, no, but also yes. And so Phoebus has to stay that night to catch up. Also, in the middle of it, I hear a voice in my head, and it's Faldar asking if I remember him and if I trust him enough to meet him behind the overseer's huts that night. After the disaster of Phoebus not being able to catch up because we were using Kanks, who does that? Lord Jackhammer goes up to the Templar and says, listen, Phoebus isn't cutting it. You need better management on that mixing crew, so put me in charge of it. And so they do, because he's proved himself to be pretty successful. So now we've absorbed the mixing crew, which includes Phoebus. Meanwhile, Kadon meets with Rickus in the gladiator pits, and he says that there's a meeting he needs to get to, and that he needs Kadon to cause a distraction so he can sneak out to the meeting and then sneak back in. And Kadon agrees to it. So like I said, at dinner time, Kadon came back to the pit with us, which was great because we love our friends, and we talked about the expansion of our operation. Basically, Lord Jackhammer has diversified his portfolio. Also, because Phoebus is on our crew now, Lord Jackhammer says you can't kill him. And Banfrey, who is on Phoebus's crew, is not super stoked about this because he hated him. And so Banfrey and Halvar are like, Halvar's like, don't kill him. And Banfrey's like, but what if I do? Wink. And Halvar's like, I'll kill you. So that's a situation that you can imagine how well that goes. So because he's being quite successful, Lord Jackhammer decides that he needs to make himself a tie. So he finds some material, a nice like red blood-stained piece of fabric, and he makes himself a tie. And then he looks over at his roommate Argus, who he like totally crushed his quota the other day because of our help, also has a tie, and they like fist bump from afar. When the overseers are being led out to their huts, I cast Pass Without Trace on myself and my lovely clutch mate Doug because he's not gonna leave without me. And little Jenny also put invisibility on him, which was great. And we go off to behind the overseers' huts. And there is Faldar. And it's interesting because apparently Faldar will only talk to you if you're by yourself. And I wasn't by myself, but he didn't know. And he appears because he was invisible, and he gives me this papyrus with writing on it and says, can you please deliver this for me? I'll put the guards to sleep so you can get out and deliver this to this place. I'm looking for Asenath, who's also of the Veiled Alliance. And he should be at the Templar Shade Inn. So I agree to it, and we head out, and then when we get onto the street, Doug's invisibility wears off, and I'm like, listen buddy, do you know where this is? Because I'm not used to being in this city. And he does, and so he starts to lead the way. But as we're going, we're being followed by a Templar. I managed to sneak us around the corner, and I cast Pass Without Trace on us again, and then he doesn't see us, so it's great. And we get to the inn, and we say, we're looking for Asenath. I have this piece of paper, and the barkeep lets us into the back room. The papyrus has a note about a heartwood spear being made by Nock, and also a password to a meeting, which I know the password is phenomena. Do, 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 do. It's so weird when the campaigns are converging like this. So Athenas says I have an amulet of protection for you guys, so we both get one. And he gives me a scroll of sleep and says I'm not gonna force you to go back into the pits, but if you do so, it would be great for us to have a messenger, and I would love for you to pass this message back on to Faldar. So he gives me the message and we go back, and the plan is to just cast Pass Without Trace and try to sneak in. Well, Doug is not particularly sneaky, and so I have to cast sleep and I use up the scroll. But it's not like anybody's going to say, oh, we were sleeping, but we thought we saw people sneaking back into the pit. So I think we're good. In the morning, we wake up and Phoebus is dead. And Lord Jackhammer's not happy, but Halvar is even more unimpressed because he specifically told Banfrey not to do it. And so the two Largeson brothers kill Banfrey for killing Phoebus, who was family. It's really messed up, and now we're down 2 members on our crew, and we've expanded, we're doing a lot more. We're in the middle of the day when we start to hear rumors that nobles are coming for an inspection, and that King Calic himself might actually be there. And sure enough, while we're on our first break, suddenly on top of the ziggurat appears King Calic and a bunch of his nobles. He says that some of his nobles aren't happy because he's taken all their slaves away to build the ziggurat, and so he wants to make an example of them, and he throws 2 of them from the ziggurat and down into the slave pit. Well, as you can imagine, the slaves aren't very happy about this, and about 15 of them just start going to attack. Urgos is like, no, this is wrong, we can't do that. So he wades in trying to go save these nobles because, you know, he just doesn't like to see people get hurt. And that means that little Jenny should go help, and then we all decide to go in and help. Halvar, he is kind of set on killing them, but fortunately Lord Jackhammer gets there first, and because he's taller, he picks them up and holds them up, and Halvar can't kill them. Although he tried, he got a good punch in before Lord Jackhammer was like, calm down, we want to save these people. Fortunately, I was able to stand back a ways and just constantly heal them, and I also cast my bear aura, which I think we were calling a Mechalot aura, I think that's what we've shifted it to, which gives 10 temporary hit points to anybody in the aura that I pick, of course. And so it was great because if they didn't have that and if I wasn't healing them, especially when Lord Jackhammer used one to hit another guy, they would have died. And it was really funny because when Halvar was trying to kill these guys, Lord Jackhammer was like, no, they got thrown away. They're on our crew now. We need people. So the slaves that are trying to attack these nobles realize that they can't get to the nobles, so their best option is to grapple Lord Jackhammer and just bring him down. And 8 of them try, and 8 of them fail. And it just didn't work out too well. And once all the dust had cleared and we saved the nobles, Calic sends down some Templars to slit their throats. After all that effort, Lord Jackhammer was not happy too because he was counting on those guys to haul water. But Calic was impressed that we stepped in to help them, and so he said Urgos, who was, you know, the first person that stepped in, and his friend, little Jenny, were now going to be nobles. So they put on the outfits, which looked ridiculous because you've got a half giant wearing like a human-sized noble outfit, and you have a halfling wearing one, and they got all their belongings and their title, and they were thrown out of the slave pits, and now they're nobles. And now we're down another 2 people on our crew. As you can see, things are shaping up very interestingly. We've got someone in the gladiator pit. We've got someone running messages. We've got a noble. We've got someone who's like doing really well as a manager somehow for being a half giant. And we are just seizing the means of production. So when revolution time comes along, guess who's going to be super important? And that was the end of that session, and it was a super fun session. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. Also, feel free to leave any comments, and get ready for the next episode coming next Sunday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. What the? Ah, we're done.